Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our very first lesson of Unit 1, Lesson 1, Social Studies 8, first trimester. We're going to focus on the essential question, how did the United States of America gain its freedom? And we have spent a few days in class discussing what freedom is and reading some examples of speeches and primary source documents having to do with freedom. So now we're going to jump into the story of the United States of America as a country. And the very first thing we're going to do is go over the vocabulary that's going to be used in this unit. There is a section in your study guide for vocabulary, or if you're taking your notes on paper, you have the choice to write these words and these definitions into your notes, one or the other. First term we're going to discuss is freedom, which is the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. Our second vocabulary term is colony, a group of people in one place who are ruled by a parent country elsewhere. We're going to be learning about the 13 English colonies in America. Imposition, which is a new tax or law enforced by the monarch as a way to raise money. We're going to learn about the impositions of King George III over the course of time. A declaration, an official statement. You are going to be learning about the Declaration of Independence. Speaking of independence, independence means self-reliance and freedom from outside control. If you are self-reliant and you have freedom from outside control, you are independent. We also have a patriot, which is a person who supported the cause of the American Revolution, seeking to have America become an independent nation. We also had the Loyalists, a person or people who opposed the American Revolution and wished to remain part of the British Empire. We have the American Revolution, and a revolution is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. And finally, we have slavery, a system of enforced servitude in which some people are owned by other people. Those are your first 9 vocabulary words. You should get to know them well. So we've also discussed freedom in class, and in your notes, I want you to at least list the 4 types of freedom here, but if you were doing it on paper, I would suggest you make a quadrants like I have here in these notes, and we can discuss these a little bit. We haven't gone into this in that much detail in the first few days of class, but it's important to know that there are many different kinds of freedom, and depending on who you are and what's important to you, one of these types of freedom might be more important to you than others, but we're going to focus on them in some level of detail here. First of all, there's economic freedom, or the what we call the freedom of opportunity. Can you get a job? Can you start a business? Can you get ahead? And can you accumulate wealth? If you can say yes to those things, then you have a reasonable amount of economic opportunity. If you can't say yes to those things, then maybe you don't have quite the economic freedom you might want. Education also has to do with economic freedom, freedom of opportunity. Can you get an education and gain skills which allow you to become successful? Do you have the ability to get ahead, or are you stuck in one place? If you have the ability to get that education, if you have the ability to get ahead, then you have freedom of opportunity. Religious freedom, or freedom of belief, is important to many people. It may be important to you. Do you live in a place that has an official religion that you must believe in? If you do, you don't have a lot of religious freedom. Is there an official church in your country. If you do, you don't have a lot of religious freedom. Afghanistan was recently taken over once again by the Taliban, and the people who live in Afghanistan are not going to have a lot of freedom to decide which religion they should follow because it will be enforced by the government. Do you have the ability to believe what you want to believe and practice it openly? Do you have the ability to believe nothing if you want to? Both of those things are important depending on your perspective. As long as you have the freedom to believe what you want to believe and practice your faith or religion or your belief system in a way that feels authentic to you, you live in a place that has religious freedom. Personal and lifestyle freedom. The best way to describe that is, do you have the ability to be who you are without fear? Whether that's your cultural background, your orientation, any identifying aspect of who you are, do you feel free to express that without getting punished in your country or society? If you do, you live in a place with a lot of personal freedom. If you don't, you don't. And this has to do with things such as culture, identity, and language. And then there's the freedom of speech and expression. Can you express your personal thoughts or ideas? Can you express your political opinions about the government without fear of being punished? If you're in North Korea and you say something negative about the North Korean leader, you can guarantee that something's going to happen to you and it won't be good. Also, is there any form of censorship? Does the media have the ability to report the news honestly and accurately? Or does the government exercise some kind of control over what the media can or cannot report? Those would have serious impact on freedom of speech or expression. And to be honest with you, we could have a very long conversation about all of these things. And if I decide to press the pause button, we will have that conversation. But if I don't decide to press the pause button, we're going to move along. So we are now taking Cornell-style notes or focus notes, whatever you want to call them, we are taking notes. And our first essential question is, how were the 13 colonies established in America by the English? Or how were the 13 English colonies established in America? That should be a question on the left side. If you're taking Cornell notes, I always set up my presentations to correspond with how I would like you to take notes. And if you're doing the online study guide, I pretty much already have that question there for you. So let's jump right in. We're going to start at the beginning. Of course, the Native Americans were here first, but the English sent colonists to America. And a colony is a group of people in one place who are ruled by a parent country elsewhere. In this case, the parent country is England. And the very first English colony that survived is known as Jamestown. It was founded in what is the current state of Virginia in the year 1607. So that is the answer to a trivia question. But there was a colony before that known as Roanoke, but everyone from the colony of Roanoke perished, and all we know is what was carved on a tree. So feel free to look that up. Jamestown was primarily a colony based on tobacco profits. So the people who founded Jamestown were mostly interested in getting rich, and so they were looking for economic freedom, the freedom of opportunity to make money. And they mistakenly believed there was gold in Jamestown, and they spent most of their early days looking for gold and not growing food. And that did turn out to be a problem because starvation became a serious problem for the early Jamestown colonists. Eventually, the colony was saved by tobacco, but not until a lot of people died in the meantime. If we had a full year to talk about it, I would go into a lot more detail. But the basic thing you need to know is that Jamestown was the first English colony in America. Rather famously, the Puritans, who were a religious group, established the Plymouth Colony, and it is pronounced Plymouth, in what is now Massachusetts. So this is farther north, colder climate. The Puritans' motivation was not economic. The Puritans' motivation was religious. They wanted to practice their faith freely, and they did not believe they could do that in England. Plymouth was established mainly for religious freedom, as I just said, and rather famously, the first Thanksgiving took place in the Plymouth colony. It was actually a celebration between the local native tribe and the Puritans, and that's the part that sounds wholesome and good. The part that doesn't get discussed very often is that the Thanksgiving was a celebration of an alliance between that Native American tribe and the Puritans to wipe out the enemy of that tribe. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That tribe saw that the Puritans had guns and weapons. They made an alliance and they wiped out their enemies. So that's not quite as wholesome and wouldn't be quite as fun to talk about on Thanksgiving. So, like I just said, they worked together to defeat another tribe. So, we're zooming ahead here. I'm taking what would normally be taught over a few weeks if you had a full year social studies course, and I am compressing it into only the essentials. Eventually, the English formed 13 colonies in America. They were grouped into 3 regions, which are color-coded on this particular map. And the first of those regions was in the north, known as the New England colonies. So in your notes, I basically want you to know that there were colonies called the New England colonies, and I want you to know which colonies they were. So that should be written in your notes. And the New England colonies were, in fact, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. So if you can identify on a test that Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire are the New England colonies, you will get a question right on the test. There were also the middle colonies, conveniently, more or less in the middle of the map, and they were New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. If you can identify that on a test, you will do well. And then the southern colonies were Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The southern colonies specifically were heavily reliant on slavery. And in our next lesson, we are going to discuss the institution of slavery and how it played an important role in the colonies and also became a very thorny and difficult issue, not only in the colonial period, but in the early days of the United States. And one of the chapters in our history we have, safe to say, a great deal of difficulty wrestling with even to this day. So these are your 3 colonial regions. And for the time being, we're going to stop the notes right there. And we'll pick up next time talking about the history of how slavery began in America and the role it played in the early colonial economy. So that's it for today. This is Mr. Blumendahl signing off until next time on the Waldo Middle School Social Studies YouTube Network.